Hello and welcome to the EDU-TALK author series hosted by Biotone Edu Partner Program, and massage industry authors. The EDU-TALK author series is a bonus extension to EDU-TALK Tuesdays to further support virtual learning and connect you with industry authors who, through their books and textbooks, support your career success. Today's authors are Pat Archer and Lisa Nelson, two powerhouses of knowledge with over 2 decades as licensed massage therapists, educators, and school directors. Their combined knowledge and experience as educators makes them uniquely qualified to present and prepare students for effective clinical decision-making and understanding concepts of applied anatomy and physiology for their practice and career success. Let's listen and learn as Pat and Lisa share their inspiration, insights, tools, and tips from their highly respected co-authored textbook, Applied Anatomy and Physiology for Manual Therapists, now in its 2nd edition. Hi, Pat and Lisa, how are you today? Thanks.
Hi, Danelle. Great, thanks for having us.
So before I step off the screen, let's see the cover of the book we'll be hearing about today. Applied Anatomy and Physiology for Manual Therapists. All right, well, it's all yours. Here you go.
Thank you, Danelle. We're going to have a little conversation here about our 2nd edition of this textbook. So we'll start it off with a little discussion about what led us to write the book in the first place. What was our inspiration and how we chose to do this? And I think that back in 1986, when I started teaching with Heide Brennecke at the Brennecke School of Massage here in Seattle, I had come from a background in which I was an athletic trainer. Lisa joined the faculty in 1990. Yeah. And her background was the same. She also came from athletic training. Both of us kind of came from a very anatomy physiology related field in which we were using the concepts of anatomy physiology every day to guide us in what we were doing with the athletes and the active people that we were working with. It was helping us with our decisions on what to do, what not to do. And we really were then teaching in the massage field. As we started in the massage field, we were teaching from textbooks that were really like freshman in college anatomy physiology textbooks. And those were pretty expensive books came about at those times, and there was so much extraneous information in those books that massage therapists, manual therapists in general, really were never going to use. We were trying to relate the anatomy physiology to their practices, and we were creating bridges between the facts of anatomy physiology to the manual therapy techniques that they were going to be applying. And as we were doing that more and more, we were recognizing students were really only able to relate to the anatomy physiology when we were providing some of those links. Otherwise, it was kind of boring, and they didn't really get it. They were passing tests and letting go of material and not using it in what they were doing. We were finding that some of the materials that were being taught in the massage side of the faculty stuff was that it was really not helping relate some of the important anatomy physiology,
or it was sparse. Some of the textbooks were very, if you weren't using a college level A&P book that had too much information, The other choice seemed to be ones that were really sparse. Here's 2 pages about a system that didn't get enough background for people to work with.
Right.
So we felt kind of caught between those 2 things. And other than, I don't know, in 1990, other than Dean Yuhan's Job's Body, there weren't a lot of books written for manual therapy.
Yes,
For the A&P.
I think that we were just stuck with what and so the inspiration was, we felt like we could really help manual therapists bring the anatomy physiology to life. And when we wrote the book was when the research was really starting to be compounded and really starting to come to light on some of the manual therapy concepts. And we felt like it would be a really good way to engage the students. We knew that from our former careers, and as we began as massage therapists, we knew we were using our anatomy physiology information on a daily basis. It was really guiding our decision making, and we felt it would be really helpful if we could add that to the curriculum as students were learning anatomy and physiology. As Lisa has talked before about the fact that, different programs, different schools, anatomy physiology is an interesting and kind of a paradoxical course in that different people are going to approach it in different ways and use it for different reasons.
And some kind of approach it like, this is just stuff you have to know because it's this many hours in the curriculum and it kind of becomes background, but not important information. Or there are even programs that use it to kind of like, this is weed out information. How serious are you about doing this work? And I'm sure there's lots of other beautiful motivations, but some of those motivations concerned us because our point was, this is practical information. This is useful. We use it every day. You use it every day. And it's something that often gets thrown at people like, science is scary. Math and science are scary. And the reality is that science is really not much different than the creative process, other than the creative process you gather from your everyday life. You're comfortable, right? And so I write a song, or I write a poem, or I write a short story, or expand from my imagination, and that feels good and comfortable to me. Scientists really do the same thing. They're gathering their experience and saying, well, but why? And asking the question and pursuing it. And learning that information shouldn't be terrifying. It should be engaging and intriguing, and we should approach it in a practical manner.
Right.
So, coming up with giving people, to steal, Books of Discovery's words, that practical path to understanding and applying A&P is really what we were after.
Right. So we were very inspired with the first edition, and as we got through that first edition, and as we're looking at the second edition, it just became very apparent that all the new research that was coming out, we really needed to update several of the sections. We needed to share some of the exciting new pieces of information that were coming out. And so we were happy, to be able to go to the second edition on this. It was apparently our approach was well enough received that we got to go to the second edition and go through that process. So
and updated research, and with Books of Discovery, we're able to have an online bibliography. So as new information is coming out, we can pull the research, make it available to instructors and students so they can look at where stuff is coming from, because this information evolves. Again, when you're talking about science information, sometimes we teach it the same way over and over, and the textbooks just repeat it over and over without always recognizing that the science has changed. Even the cells, the information about receptors on the cell membrane making decisions, and that the DNA is not, that's not the brain of the cell. The nucleus is not the brain, right? So things update and change in our perspective, and we want to kind of stay after that. Some of the things in the new edition that I think have really helped make it more approachable, maybe more applicable for people, is we created unit openers.
Yeah.
Often people look at a textbook and it's divided into units, but nobody pays attention to that, right? Because you just want to dig in, get the information, and pass the test. Well, if you take a breath, pause, and sit back, the units are about how do I take a couple of systems and how are they tied together? So it's approaching a more holistic view of things. So that's what the unit openers were designed to do.
Yeah, and it really, I think that it's an important concept that as we work from the broad concept into the details of all of the things, I think it's helpful for students to really recognize that nothing exists on its own, and we've used that phrase over and over again, and yet we're teaching individual systems and individual pieces of the systems. It's helpful to start with that broader concept and say again, nothing exists alone. These are entwined, they interact with each other, and here's how, and then we break that down into the other pieces. So I think those unit openers are helpful.
Yeah.
In following that kind of thinking.
Right. And then we added some pre-learning scenarios at the front of every chapter. And hopefully that makes the information more approachable. These are kind of everyday examples of how this system shows up in your life, or everyday questions that people often ask or run into.
Yep.
So it's just a way of easing you in to approach. And what are some of the questions I have? Our experience of teaching A&P is that most people are really fascinated and intrigued by the body. And maybe they're thrown off because there can be a lot of language.
Yes.
And every field has language. It's just a part of it. And if you relax and ease in and learn the terminology, you start to get that it's more practical.
Yeah.
It's more efficient.
Right.
And it helps you communicate with other professional healthcare people, which you are going to have the opportunity to do when you're working with clients who have all sorts of conditions and challenges.
Shall we show a couple of openers or?
No, let's go on to some of the other things.
Stuff. Okay. All right.
These things.
So we have features, learning features within each chapter that we, again, we try to make it practical in what we're trying to do. So we have all these learning features that are a part of us linking anatomy physiology to the work that you'll be doing with your manual therapy.
So what's on the screen now is actually from the online book. That's one of the great things. There's an ebook you can use. There's also the paper copy of the book, and this is from the ebook. And some of those features that Pat was alluding to is there's pathology alerts. I think you can see here, if I enlarge this a little bit, here's a pathology alert out of myofascial neuromuscular chapter of connecting. And it's just a way of saying learning A&P isn't all about, or the only connection to your A&P isn't pathology, but they are important links, because sometimes it's easier to understand what normal function is by seeing or understanding something about function that's not what you are looking for.
Yeah, right.
So those are what the pathology alerts are.
And right next to that, you can see we have in each chapter a section that is called manual therapy application. And again, it's about taking the anatomy physiology or a piece of the anatomy physiology and saying, hey, look, this has a direct implication on what you're choosing to do or what you're trying to avoid doing in your massage or other manual therapy forms. And in this chapter, the myofascial and neuromuscular links chapter, pretty much the whole chapter is about manual therapy applications.
But in every chapter, these applications are sort of scattered throughout, so that you've studied a little bit or read about a piece of information, and it's like, so here's how this directly links. That was one of the things when we were teaching, is that you could teach a lot of information, and there's the students that are either checking out, but there's those really fantastic, challenging students that are saying, why do I have to know this? And so manual therapy applications are in the book of here's why you might want to know this. Here's how it applies to the work that manual therapists are doing. And while that may not be the work that the student is called to, they are called to do work and be in the field. And it's helpful to have those things.
Yeah. And so, you're seeing examples in the pathology alerts. We're generally not just saying this is the pathology. Ruth Warner has a great book, Pathology for Massage Therapists, there. But what we're trying to do is say, understanding this physiology helps you understand this pathology and helps you recognize some things that maybe you should and should not do.
Yeah. And so 2 other features we just want to point out. One is the what do you think questions, which you can see. These again are smattered through each chapter and break it into useful chunks,
Yeah.
would you say?
Yeah.
But they also help students think about extending beyond the information, not just do I know A, B, C, or D, this answer for something, but how do you take this and what do you think? So like this question, how does the information about fascial plasticity shape your thinking, and get them talking and pondering and working through things. Similarly, there's another feature called By the Way, which is just like an aside. We didn't want to spend a lot of time in the chapter talking about some of these things, but it's kind of like, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
this is another connection you could think about.
Like pieces of information that are, again, interesting and kind of intriguing, but we wouldn't expect to show up on anybody's test questions. Just keep the people interested in something as we're going through each of those things. I'm not sure what you.
Well, I was just thinking, we've talked a lot about the features. One of the things about A&P books, standard A&P books, was that there were things they didn't talk about and things that they talked too much about. It's not important. I don't believe anyway. Somebody else can prove me wrong, please. But I don't know that for many body workers, knowing the difference between rods and cones, the sensory receptors of the eyes, is a really important piece. So minimizing that, but spending more information or time in space talking about fascia as a contiguous system and what does that mean and how does that apply to what we do. The lymphatic system, a lot of places don't spend time talking about the lymphatic system, and yet we know lymphatic work is very specific and an important piece. And learning some techniques, all those sorts of things, giving a student a view of continuing education they could take later, or something they might feel is like, I really want to work with people with lymphedema, and understanding that, okay, but you're going to need more training is important.
Yeah. And in particular for me with the lymphatic system, it just is so important for all manual therapists to recognize that not all swelling is the same.
Correct.
And that there are things that you should and
Huge.
should not do. Those are huge things. And it's about the anatomy and physiology of the system and how it operates. And so that's an important piece. And of course, always standard anatomy physiology books don't always pay enough attention in our perspective on the neuromuscular reflexes and the links that we as manual therapists are utilizing all the time, every day as we're going through that. It's just as important to understand those links and with fascia, looking at the links between interoception and fascia. It is really important because that's part of what helps you feel good,
Right. And we're pretty pragmatic about what we've done here. We believe that people can do a great massage without knowing any A&P. But the difference between doing a great massage and serving clients and supporting clients and being a member of the allied healthcare community really is an issue of, do you understand how the body works? As much as you understand energy or how the mind works or how the psyche or any of those things that, look, if you want to work with people in a holistic way, part of that needs to be understanding the body and how it works. And starting to look at those connections.
Right. That's just really, we're always going to be working on helping people communicate with the medical community at large and their clients in an understandable way. So if you know it well enough, you can explain it simply.
Right.
And that's really important. One of the things that I think that really helps us also is the review guide with the Applied Anatomy and Physiology book. So this review guide is not a, it's a pretty special approach. And I have my co-author to thank for a good deal of this. Is one of the things that we wanted to do with this review guide was to make sure that we weren't just asking students to regurgitate quiz answers or to only label the diagrams that were in the book.
And while it has those things, it has quizzes so students can practice those things. And it does have fill in the blank exercises. It also has some guides for how to build a model for something so that you can understand the structure of something. Instead of just asking you to fill in the blank, there's crosswords puzzles that for those people who love those sorts of things, it gives them a different way of getting at the information. This one we're really psyched is color. So that some of the diagrams that are labeled are in full color. It points you back to the textbook. That if you can't answer this or do this exercise or some of those sorts of things, feel free to go back to these pages in the book. So it does work hand in hand. And lots of times students are like, do I really have to buy the study guide? And that's a choice that people make and a choice that schools make, depending on how useful. But we wanted to create something that would entice and support different types of learners, connecting to the information, understanding, and being able to review the information.
Yeah, I think that, we have designed the review guide as a way to engage different learning styles and guide you to these are the kinds of things that you want to do if you're a kinesthetic learner, and these are the kinds of things you want to do if you're a little bit more traditional or linear in your thinking process.
And the book's just pragmatic again. The books are available through Books of Discovery, which is the publisher. So I would contact them either for paper physical copies of the books for those of you that want that, and also access to the ebook, which is through Vital Source.
Yeah. So again, here's Applied Anatomy and Physiology for manual therapists. So we hope you'll pick up your copy and be interested and engaged in the learning process.
Well, I just clicked myself off. That was fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I'm not a therapist, and I really appreciated hearing all of that. I was almost inspired to think maybe I should become a therapist. And I mean,
feel free to join us, Danelle.
Okay. I mean, there is so much to know, and I don't know what to say. And the way you have laid out your books, the review book going hand in hand with the textbook, I think is a fabulous feature. The images on that, the way people can work through and refer back to, is fabulous.
Thank you.
And again, the book can be purchased at booksofdiscovery.com.
Yes.
And if people listening have any questions, can they reach out and contact you directly, or what would you suggest?
Either through Books of Discovery, and they forward questions to us all the time, or right now, discoverypoint.schoolofmassage@gmail.com. And we'll see those emails and can respond.
Discovery Point.
School of Massage, all smashed together.
Okay.
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Great. Great.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful information, fabulous work that you're both doing and that you've contributed to the massage profession. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, hope you'll join us again on your next edition.
We'd be happy to.
We'd love to.
Okay.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.